Morning, Rick.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. This is Jomo Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is August 11th, Tuesday, about 8 a.m., and we're here for a special Energy for All Alaska Task Force meeting. We come roaring back from our July break with a double up this week. We had the Alaska Gas Line Development Corp on Tuesday, our normally scheduled Tuesday, to discuss the Alaska LNG project, as well as an open regulatory process receiving public comment. And today we're having ConocoPhillips relative to their Willow project. We have with us as our special guest, Vice President of External Affairs for ConocoPhillips Alaska, Mr. former Senate President Ben Stevens, as well as his team. And without further ado, sir, I'll go ahead and let you have the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jomo. Yeah, good morning, everyone. And thank you for your time. You know, we're going to go through this pretty quickly. It's a business update. It's a combination of a business update and then sort of a status on the Willow project and a sort of a request for engagement on the Willow project, and we'll go right through it. But first is our important cautionary statement that says some of the things I say may not come true, and you can choose to believe what I say or not to believe, but it's a requirement under the SEC that we provide this cautionary statement. If you're really bored sometime on a boat stuck at sea in a long drift, we'll send you this and you can read it and understand it. But anyway, next slide, please. So we're going to do a brief company overview, a little business update and then we'll get into little details on the Willow project, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A as we get through this. So you know, just a brief overview. I know you guys are pretty familiar with this. This is a snapshot of the North Slope. In the orange is all the acreage under lease by ConocoPhillips. And so if you start at the right side of the screen, you've got the Prudhoe Bay unit that is operated by Hilcorp, and they've done a pretty good job during the transition operating that field at bringing in some new energy and some new operating procedures, and that's going real well. And then that jagged line that goes from southeast to northwest, that delineates the Kuparuk field, of which ConocoPhillips is pretty much now the majority owner. They just bought in the process of buying out the last piece of Chevron. So that's ConocoPhillips and ASRC, or ASRC has a small minority partnership there. You can see the three central processing facilities in the Kuparuk region. And then that pipeline that goes from the CPF over to the Trans-Alaska pipeline that goes south, that's the Kuparuk pipeline. We operate that. And then from CPF 2 to the west, across the Colville River Delta, to the Alpine Central Processing Facility, the dot, and then the triangles are projects under development in the Alpine field. And then you go further west to the Greater Moose's Tooth unit. That's two production pads, GMT 1 and 2. And then of course, further to the west is what we call the Beartooth unit that has the Willow prospect. So the difference is the green outlines are projects under development and assessment. And then the darker orange are prospective reservoirs that have done seismic work but have yet to be drilled and assessed. So it gives you a pretty good idea of the span of acreage under lease by ConocoPhillips. We are the largest leaseholder in the North Slope. The dark gray is state land, and then the light gray, shaded gray is the NPRA. ConocoPhillips is the only producer in the NPRA, currently with GMT 1 and GMT 2, and then of course the Willow project would be a much bigger project as we go. And then the little box on the far left, you can sort of see how it's located in terms of the entire scope of the North Slope. So next slide, please. Additionally to oil production, we also operate a fleet of 3 Q400 de Havilland Q400 aircraft that we fly our staff as well as contractors back and forth from Anchorage to Kuparuk into Alpine. We also have two smaller aircraft, a CASA and a Twin Otter that go east-west along the North Slope and shuttle freight equipment and personnel back and forth from Deadhorse to Kuparuk and Alpine back and forth. We as many people know, we're 29% ownership in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Network, as well as I mentioned, the Kuparuk Pipeline, the Alpine Pipeline, and the Aliktok Pipeline is a smaller line that most people don't realize, but it's a fuel gas line that takes a natural gas from Prudhoe Bay and ships it west to provide power for electrical generation and turbine injection and production in the Kuparuk and the Alpine field. So the Aliktok line moves gas west for internal use to run the field. And also the polar tankers, the company owns 5 Jones Act class double hull tankers that transport ConocoPhillips product from Valdez to the various West Coast refineries. And we'll have a little bit more about that. Next slide, please.
Actually, Mr. Stevens,
yes,
I just wanted to thank you for that. I've seen a bunch of presentations from ConocoPhillips down through the years. This is the very first one that talks about some of the stuff to help support your activities. I would have assumed that you had this kind of stuff, but this is the very first time it's ever been referenced. So
yeah,
thanks.
no, it's like I said, this is sort of a more of a company overview just to show just how engaged ConocoPhillips is in the entire process in Alaska. So it's we are what's called an E&P company, which is exploration and production. So we're not considered a major because the major would be downstream refining and distribution. So this is the focus of where ConocoPhillips Alaska is. All of these entities are owned by ConocoPhillips Alaska, not so we're a subsidiary of the ConocoPhillips Corporation. So this is a new slide that we're trying to show people in Alaska to give them just a little idea of where our product goes, at the time it takes to get to market. So if we start on the left-hand side, a typical cargo size, and what we mean by that cargo size is about 300,000 barrels. That's a lot what we sell it at in. So it's typically traded in the 300,000 barrel lots. And it usually contracted 2 months in advance of delivery. Our price is based on Brent. So, if there's indices are WTI and Brent. WTI is West Texas International, and Brent is, of course, North Sea of the Brent oil field. Those are the two main indices for marketing. And we sell at a Brent plus differential. So we get some of the highest prices in the global market for Alaska North Slope crude. And then it's the title risk, and then some payment terms, but shows you some of the distances it takes. It takes about 14 days to get to Asia, about 8 days to Hawaii for a round trip. Washington State, California, and then LA Long Beach. And so the pie chart on the top pie chart, those are our customers, right? So Phillips 66 is the old Arco plant at Cherry Point. And then you got Chevron is in Oakland. Chevron Richmond Longwharf is in Oakland. The Marathon plant is LA Long Beach. Valero is in San Francisco Bay. HollyFrontier is the former Shell refinery in Anacortes. And then you got PAR, which is the buyer in Hawaii, and then you got a small piece for the export there. And anyway, I think this is a useful for people to see. And then one thing that a lot of people don't understand, but from the maritime business, it's the trade is restricted on draft restrictions. In other words, how heavily loaded is the ship as it goes into port. So you see that the Prince William Sound and the Marathon and BP and P66. So the different draft restrictions that the refinery can take in terms of the volume that it can take. And it's an important component when we think about competition of who are we competing against to get fuel to get product into those refineries. Because if it's coming from a foreign port, obviously the foreign port wants to have a heavily loaded vessel, and they'll hold about 1.4 million barrels, which is sort of the normal standard size large tanker. But the 1.4 million barrels can't get to the refinery dock, so they have to lighter in, and of course that adds more cost. And so that's why we are so competitive in the West Coast market. It's because of our delivery methodology. But it's an interesting piece. I don't know if people are familiar with it. But next slide, please.
And actually, sir, I'll praise you once again. This is new. Thank you so much. This is a wealth of information.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And next market. So here's a little bit about our workforce. You know, we got about 960 full-time employees in Alaska. About a little over half is North Slope based, and then the other half here in Anchorage. We've got, you know, it's actually a little bit bigger than this now, about over 80% Alaska residents, and also, you know, during our work in our campaign, and of course, a lot of the work on the North Slope, everyone knows, is done by contractors, and we have about, all told, all contractors that are doing work for us, a total of about 9,000. It fluctuates between about 86 and 9,000 workers, depending on the magnitude of the work we're conducting on them that it takes to keep the North Slope operational. Next slide, please. Of course, you know, ConocoPhillips, as you've seen before, and come with earlier ones, we've been operating on the North Slope through legacy operators over 50 years, have just decades and decades of scientific studies and base numbers and base analysis. I always say that, you know, this building here in Anchorage houses the highest level of scientific environmental engineers, environmental scientists in Alaska. We have just an amazing amount of talent that have been dedicated to studying caribou, to yellow-billed loons, to migratory birds, to fish, to air quality, to water quality. So they take Conoco takes the impact on the environment very seriously, and it's an integral part of the pre-planning process to make sure that our mitigation strategies are meaningful and to have reduced the impact. And in each time we go through a new development, there's less and less impact, and hopefully more and more production. Next slide, please. So going for a little bit for the business update about what's actually happening this year. So to date, so far, we're averaging about 199,000 barrels a day in production. It's a little bit below what our forecast was, but we think we're going to be able to make it up as temperatures cool off again. Right now, we're going through some operation maintenance turnarounds in the North Slope, so production's down for the month of August. As from July 15th to August 15th is traditionally, that's the time of year when everything sort of shuts in and a lot of the maintenance is done. But the second quarter for 2022 was an amazing quarter. We invested about $200 million in all of our projects in the North Slope. We incurred, almost $981 million in taxes for one quarter, of which $770 million was paid to the state, $210 million to the federal government. So the price of the global commodity has had a significant impact on revenue to the state as well as revenue to the company in this year, especially this prior quarter. Next slide.
That was just for the quarter?
That's correct. That's just one quarter. So just to pull it out of context for a minute, I was with the state government for a couple of years before I came here, and we were doing budget forecasting and assembling the budget for the budget for 2020, we anticipated a total production tax revenue from the industry in total of $746 million in 2020. So one quarter 2022, one company has provided $770 million. So you can see it's price is a huge impact on the revenues to the state. Next slide, please. So I think you guys might have heard of this, but it's a pretty significant achievement. Greater Moose's Tooth 2 was brought online, first oil in late December 21. It's a 36 well development pad, currently in the 9th well, and production is meeting expectation. Right now it's producing about, I just looked this morning, it's up to 19,000 barrels a day, but only through the 9th well. So out of 36 wells, estimated peak production out of that facility at GMT2 is to be about 30,000 barrels a day. So it's new barrels into the pipeline. And that's really sort of the theme of what ConocoPhillips is adding barrels to the production process and maintaining base production as well as adding new barrels. And so that's what GMT, the Greater Mythos Tooth unit, has accomplished.
Mr. Stevens, we have a question for Mr. Soley.
Yeah, go Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, Ben, remind me of the capital cost of Greater Moose's Tooth.
So GMT2 was about a 1.4 billion total investment. It's a little bit less than than Willow because it doesn't have what they call an operations center or processing center. So all that, there's nobody that lives out there. It's all serviced from the Alpine facility. So all that oil is crude oil, and it goes through the separator at the Alpine. So it's about 1.4 billion.
Wow, thank you.
So then, I don't know if a lot of you guys are familiar with the Doyon 26, and Beast, and we're not supposed to call it that, but some of us have been around a long time, remember what it was. So the Fiord West prospect, which in the extended reach drilling, ERD stands for extended reach drilling and development. So in May of this year, they finally hit total depth on that well of 35,526 feet. Longest well in North American. It's a North American record from a well drilled from shore, a horizontal drill. And the reservoir came in above expectation. And so that first well was challenging, and it took longer than expected. The original drilling forecast was for 142 days, and they finally hit TD at day 340. So what they're doing right now is they're adjusting different type of drilling techniques, what worked, what didn't work. And so it's a 5-well development, and the second well is due to spud, I believe, late November, early December. So that's really a significant achievement for the company. And mainly because if you see the location of that reservoir, it's offshore, and it's right below the Colville River Delta. So that the property never would have met environmental standards to get access to it if it wasn't for this extended horizontal drilling that goes at about 82 degrees drilling for about 5 miles. So it's a horizontal drill all the way across, and it snakes up and down through the reservoir. It's a pretty amazing feat. The company's very proud of that accomplishment, the innovation and technology to be able to get that. And many of you guys may remember that field's been known for a long, long time. It was, an old Armstrong, Anadarko, Kalis field that they were never able to find a way to actually produce the reservoirs.
So to be able to get at the resource without having to disturb the surface.
It's really an accomplishment. So next slide, please.
Oh, by the way, so everyone noticed Rick went ahead and raised his hand to ask a question. I just want to remind everyone that option is available to all of you. Again, these presentations are for you. So if you do have any questions, if you just want to raise your hand, you can put them in the chat box. Mr. Stevens is again, we're here for you. Thanks, sir.
Yep, thank you, Jomo. So this is what I mentioned earlier about our base development. So it's important to sort of get a picture that this is what they call the base development, right? So you got the Petroleum unit, the Kuparuk unit, Colville unit, or better known as Alpine, and then GMT2. In ConocoPhillips, in our long range plan, it's been circulated. The plan is about $1 billion a year in capital investment to keep this base development at maintaining levels and actually increasing over the next 10 years. And these are the projects that they're focused on. So in Prudhoe Bay unit, the blue dots, those are going to be managed by Hillcorp. The VBLX is one unit, the West End development field there, and there's another one that got called the iPad that Hillcorp is is going to be operating and implementing. Of course, ConocoPhillips is a participant in that through the unit agreement. And then the Kuparuk unit, there's the Eastern News expansion. The Nuna is a part of the Narwhal development. It's a I believe it'll be a new pad there with 4 wells by the end of the year. And then there's another prospect that is underway. It hasn't spudded yet, but it's going to be pretty quickly. It's the Coyote development. It's a drilling pair. That's going to be an assessment there. And then I think there's another 18 well development under the Coyote, and that's an existing unit. And then of course, we talked about the Fiord West. And then there's the CD4 pad, which is CD4X. This is the 3rd time the CD4 pad is going to be expanded by another 12 wells. And then there's a long-term prospect in the Narwhal, which is a new pad, which would be CD8. That's under engineering and pre-engineering and design. And then of course we mentioned the GMT2. So these are it's really important that people understand that ConocoPhillips, has a long-term capital investment plan in existing development to maintain production from the facilities that we know and keep them upgraded, and road maintenance and facility maintenance as we go along. And then additionally, there's the exploration and assessment. And let's jump back to this. I think this is the 3rd slide. Can you go back there for a second? Oh, second. Sorry about it. I meant to change this, but and so the other piece is that bear in the center of the screen down at the bottom. That's bear. That's additional ConocoPhillips leased land, and it's called the Bear Prospect, and we just got approved that we're in the final stages of approval right now to get an exploration well on Bear this winter, which would be again, ConocoPhillips continues to have base production, new development, and continue to explore for new reservoirs. And the Bear is on state land too, by the way. So I think that's just important in the business overview.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Bear is pretty far south. Would that be considered foothills?
That's kind of foothills. There's what they call DS2, which is, remember, the meltwater comes down. You see where it is right there in the center there and down there. That's meltwater. And then so you can sort of see where Bear is. You just see the top portion of it down in the lower left. But right below the Narwhal, there's a unit that's the meltwater unit. And that produced for a long time, but we shut that one in. But there's still facilities to that. So the road would be from there down to Bear. But the assessment will take place whether Bear is a significant enough resource to have its own processing facility, because that's what it would need for that far. It'd be hard to move raw crude that far. To the nearest processing facility would be CPF2 there in the center of Kuparuk. But anyway, it's under assessment, but it's again, the important piece, Jomo, is that the company is engaged in allocating large sums of capital to maintaining base production, adding production through development of GMT2, Willow, and then continuing to explore for a new resource. So next slide, please. So we'll move into the Willow for a minute, which is really, and we put this on here because those of us that have been to the slope or know the slope or know Alaska, that just the remoteness, and this just shows you sort of the remoteness of the pad development. That's an exploration pad in Willow that took place, ice road, ice pad. And so the project is in the NPRA. It's 37 road miles from GMT2. And it's been under review from BLM. First application was done in 2017. So it's been through 3 presidential administrations, been through 5 public comment periods, and it's been reviewed in thousands and thousands of pages of documents of scientific and environmental impacts and and projects and development. And we're sort of at the final, we're in the final gate, we think it is, because the public comment period is open now and it closes on August 29th. So next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit about the master development plan. So if we look at the picture on the right, the shaded, the tan area is the NPRA. It's 23 million acres in total. It's the largest single piece of land under management by the BLM nationwide. So the shaded area with this red, with the red shade, that area is already off limits to development. So the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska, over half of it has already been eliminated offshore, not eligible for leasing. And so you see our area, the green is the area we have under lease, and you can sort of see the framework and the outline of the GMT2 unit as well as the Beartooth unit. So it's interesting to see that how the lines go from red to green to black. So the black is the actual unit that we've been approved. The green lines represent special areas that the BLM has put on top of it. So you have the red line shaded area, that's a special, that's a no use, no access facility, no leasing in those areas. And then the green shade represents different type of special areas. So you have what's called the Tushpuk Lake Special Area Unit. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's another interesting piece. We hosted a journalist from The Economist came up in late June. I guess it was mid-July. And she wanted to go to the North Slope, so we took her to the North Slope. And she'd done her homework. She like The Economist is a very reputable publication. And so she said something to me that I thought was pretty remarkable. She said, President Harding created the NPRA, National Petroleum Reserve. Back then it was called Petroleum Reserve number 4 in 1923. And it's taken 100 years for you guys to produce oil out of this place. It's kind of like, she was kind of like, why did it take so long? I said, well, because it's the federal government. That's a whole nother presentation on that. But the lower part on the left, just shows you, some of the stipulations and some of the management practices that ConocoPhillips has intertwined into the master development plan. 265 different mitigation plans, and the development itself is 21 miles from the Tushpuk Lake special use area. So interesting to see the size and the magnitude. And the Willow footprint, by the way, the total acreage that we would be impacting is 486 acres. That includes roads, pipelines, and pads and airstrip. But 486 acres out of 23 million. Next slide, please. This is an interesting map. Some of the guys don't really think that this is something that I should show, but I like to show it and mainly focus on the one on the right. So the one on the right is the Beartooth unit that's outlined in those different shaded colors. But this is a surface use that you're allowed to do because of the restrictions on the surface. And so the black is, you can't have any occupancy in that area. The black is because it's a nesting area, or it's a fish-bearing stream or river. And then you have the dark gray, is you can have access through that with a waiver from the BLM. And then the gray is you're supposed to avoid if practical, but no waiver, right? And so when you look at something like that, you say, how do you get access to any of that area or to put any facilities in? And this is in the surface use. And so, but yet we pay for the lease of all that acreage. It's kind of a challenge. That's the reason why I like to show it. Next slide, please.
It shows the challenge you overcome.
Yeah.
Finding that least impactful, negatively impactful spot to get
Yeah.
the development in and done.
So here's the master development plan, which is really, we like to focus on the bottom, which is the timeline, right? So the timeline is 99. The first lease was acquired in the NPRA. And then the 2013, it took a long time for what they call the 2013 integrated activity plan that the department had to approve through an environmental impact statement record of decision. So there's all these acronyms, and I'm giving you what they all mean, but then we'll test you at the end if you can remember them all, because there's a lot of acronyms in the oil business and in government. So, but then you fast forward to 2015 was the Willow discovery. And then there was another NPR lease sale in late 16, early 17. And then the BLM begins to have meetings on Willow, and then in 2017, as I mentioned, we actually submitted the master development plan, ConocoPhillips, to the BLM, and they started out the environmental impact statement. So from 2017, you've had this, BLM does a notice of intent to issue the environmental impact statement. You have a drafting statement, you have a supplemental impact statement, you have a final environmental impact statement, you have a Willow Rod, then you have the new administration, and you have Biden's 2020 integrated activity plan. Then you have the Ninth Circuit, the environmentalists sued the federal government that made the record of decision, sued them in federal court. The court vacated the record of decision. ConocoPhillips requested an additional national environmental impact analysis. We had formal scoping that you guys may remember. We had a meeting in February and March of this year. The draft has come out, and so we're in that green phase right now. The draft environmental impact statement public comment period, and we're shooting to try to get this finalized so we can get construction going this winter. If you look at the map in the upper left, you can see that the dark is the proposed development plan. So from GMT2, you see the road going out to the Alpine facility airstrip, central processing facilities, and the 3 production pads that are in alternative E. And then down at the bottom, BT Beartooth pad number 5 will be authorized, but it's going to be required to have another environmental impact statement before it can be produced. So alternative E approves the strip, the operations center, the processing facility center, and development pads 1, 2, and 3. So that's where we are now. We think it's a viable path forward to production. You can see on the right some of the challenges, as well as some of the benefits that come out. The 8 to 17 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenues. That's a pretty wide gap, but as we talked about earlier, that's based at a couple of different price scenarios. So BLM has done pricing at the impact at low price averages through the course of the project, or high price. So depending on prices, how much that money it produces. So next slide, please. So this one here just kind of shows you the difference. So the alternative B, if we go down to the lower left, alternative B, that was what was approved by the Trump administration. So 5 drill sites, road mile. So you see the difference between B and E. It's one less drill site, less roads, less impact of acreage, less drill sites within the Touchbrook Lake Special Area, and then significant reduction on the footprint within the Touchbrook Lake Special Area. So you see again, I mentioned about the green lines. So the green, and you go to the right hand side, you can see the light shaded dotted lines up to BT4 And so we sort of changed a couple of the locations of the pads, shrunk down the distance for BT5 to the south, sort of taking the BT2 north pad and taking it from south of Fish Creek to the north of Fish Creek so you can still access that reservoir that was up under BT4. With that green outline, again, that's the Tushbuck Lake special area that we keep talking about. Next slide, please.
Actually, sir, if I may, if we could just stay there one more second.
You're good. Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, the lighter shaded gray would have been what was proposed under alternative B.
That's
And
correct.
okay, what you're proposing under alternative E is the black.
Yeah. So B was what was approved and was rejected by the court. Right. And so the court sent it back to the agency and said it's inadequate. Really, it was inadequate on three things. One was surface impacts within the Tushbuck Lake special area, greenhouse gas emissions, and the polar bear biological opinion. And so it's oddly enough, there was really no, the master development plan didn't really address polar bears, mainly because it's 78 miles from the coast and polar bear habitat is traditionally within 25 miles of the coast. So that one was kind of addressed by Fish and Wildlife and by the department. The greenhouse gas issue was, the court rejected it, saying that the agency didn't take into consideration the emissions of that would have occurred in foreign lands from the production caused by the production of Alaska oil. So in other words, Alaska oil would have come into the United States, displaced foreign oil would have then been consumed overseas, and we didn't calculate that. So the response that came back from the agency, this is kind of an interesting response. The agency came back to us and said, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of this one because we've got 5,500 federal leases that are producing oil and gas, and we haven't addressed that in any of them. And so the agency's got that one under control. So we hope that the court will accept what the agency is producing. And then the one that was most impactful to our plan of operations was we didn't properly assess and do the best to mitigate surface impact in the Tushbuck Lake special area. And so you can see what we did there is we reduced the footprint, we reduced the road miles, and we reduced the drill sites, and we've taken routes so we have less impact. And so that's kind of how it all came to alternative E.
Okay.
Next slide, please. I think so this is sort of the economic benefit of the Willow Project. This was put out by corporate, not by us. It shows, the economic benefits, an estimated $4 billion in royalty to the feds, 2.3 billion through the NPR Impact Mitigation Fund, 1.2 billion over the course of the project in property tax assessment, as well as 1.4 to the state through production tax and income tax, and property tax, and that's again at a price deck that was, you can see in the footnotes there. The price deck was from the Revenue Sources book at $60 a barrel through the course of a project, which is a 30-year life. So that is going to, again, you have to make a prediction, you have to make a forecast, and that's what they used. So then if we go down to the lower left, the $8 billion to produce, about $6 billion in construction costs, about $2 billion in drilling and well development, about 2,000 construction jobs, over 300 long-term jobs, 6-year construction cycle. And then estimated peak production at 180,000 barrels a day. If you go back to what we said in the very beginning, our production right now from all North Slope production is about 199,000 barrels a day. So this is a significant increase in oil and barrels through the pipeline, through the Trans-Alaska pipeline system, which benefits all shippers, including the state, because it lowers the tariff. The more barrels you have per barrel mile share, the less cost it is for all shippers. Next slide, please.
Well, and it also maintains the integrity of that line. The pipeline needs oil to function.
So this is for those of us that pay attention to state budgets. We thought we'd throw this one in there just to show you the difference between and what this alternative E is. You see the top line. So it's State Department of Revenue and their price forecast, and then during the same period of time, it's the Energy Industry Associates, which is a federal. That's what the feds use for their price index. So you see the four mechanisms that the state receives money is property tax stays the same. Production tax is significantly impacted by price over the course of the life of the project. Corporate income tax is impacted obviously by how much money it takes. Then the per barrel surcharge, that's the spill response surcharge. And then you have, of course, the MPRA impact grant funds that changes as well because it's based on royalty, and royalties based on value. And then you see the federal side of it. And that's how you come to that wide spread that we talked about between 8.7 or 17 billion. So it's all based on price and how those revenues are distributed. Next slide, please. So there's a couple myth busters, and a lot of us know that the opposition has been very vocal on this project, and it's been all the way down to the point, if you see that upper right, where you've got the chairman of the House Resources from Arizona, and one from Arkansas. Well, that's the Republican from Arkansas, but Mr. Gavalva is a strongly opposed to development in Alaska, which is kind of odd because New Mexico, there's only one other state in the union that has a higher dependency on oil production than Alaska, and that's New Mexico. Anyway, Gavalva is from Arizona. He's been very vocal opposing the project. This gives you a little bit of some of the things they're doing. They're comparing Willow's cumulative emissions over a 30-year life equivalent to coal plants. It's really, there's no comparison. We're trying to push back on that. But anyway, next slide, please. So here's some of the key messages we want to, alternative E is a good path for development. There's a 45-day public comment period that's underway now, and we've been able to contain it to 45 days. There was a major push by the opposition to extend that to 120 days. We didn't, obviously, the opposition has made several vocal comments in the Washington Post and the New York Times and several publications that, they want Willow to die a death of 1,000 cuts. And what that means is they want delay of the project. The project has undergone 5 years of environmental review and processes, and we believe that the project that ConocoPhillips has put forward is the most modern, most sustainable, most environmental friendly project in North America, and it will produce needed oil for the nation with the least environmental impact of any projects in development. And so we're really looking forward to approval so we can get this project going this year, the 22-23 construction cycles. Like I said, it's estimated 6 years of construction. So first of all, is anticipated to be late 28, early 29. So it's a lot of activity, keep a lot of people busy, and it would be long-term sustainability and long-term stability for our oil infrastructure in Alaska, not just for jobs and for the movement of oil, but also for a stable revenue stream to the state, for all the other services that depend on that. So next slide. So this was a schedule that has kind of fluctuated a little bit. We, Monday night was the first virtual meeting. And then the public meetings that were actually going to be in person on the 10th and 11th, they've been rescheduled. I don't think they put those out yet. That's why we haven't changed them, but this was the original schedule. And then on Monday, the 15th, there will be a virtual meeting. And I know that many of you guys have agreed to participate that through RDC and through the Alliance and through AOGA. That's the night that industry said that they were going to participate in. But unfortunately, on Monday, the 8th, we only had three comments in support of the project. There was a lot of people from New York and California and Washington, D.C. and several of the environmental groups in Alaska co-opted the meeting because we didn't have supporters in the public comment. This is in person. But the other way to comment is here at Jomo. This is really the piece that we want people to latch onto is through what this is, the e-planning site. The e-planning site, you can upload a comment in support of, and it just, the simplest way is to sort of just draft a comment and you can just upload it into that site. The ConocoPhillips Power and Cooperation website has extensive information about the Willow Project, about its impacts in terms of economic impacts to the state, its opportunities for employment, the revenue generation to the federal and state and local governments. And so we're asking for those that want to help us participate and get this thing through the line is to visit those sites and make a comment, under your personal name and your personal address or your company, because it matters. The Bureau of Land Management is weighing public participation in their evaluation of this project. So I think that's about it. Jomo, happy to have questions for anybody if they have it, but I appreciate your time. And if you circulate that stuff, Jomo, I know you have I know we have one more, I think. Maybe, how many more do we have? One more. So this just is what we'd like to highlight. Again, as part of a member of the community in Alaska, community investment is another division that I have oversight. It's about a 5.2 million budget for annually. And some of this just shows you where some of the things we do. It's about 4.8 million in community contributions, over 390 grants. We do about 1.4 directly to nonprofits by employee-driven programs. Got a lot of volunteer hours, so it just shows you where the focus is. Art, social, civic programming is really the bulk of it. Health and safety. Got some for natural resource restoration and rehabilitation projects. You've got the Kenai Watershed Forum. You've got the United Way project. But anyway, ConocoPhillips is proud to be a member of the community and help people achieve their goals as they work through it. So Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Ben. Fascinating and exciting presentation. Just thinking back on the history, under the previous administration, the approved plan, what I would have been interested in is to look at and this is of course selfish Alaska standpoint, but look at production and then kind of that taxes royalty slide that we were compared to. Because that's been a big change just since we've been supporting this project in the industries.
So are you comparing us to different regions, you mean, or just the impact in the state?
Just the impact in the state, and specifically under the approved EIS in the previous administration.
Right.
You're now at alternative E, and it was B, I believe you said.
Yeah, B was the one that was approved at October of 20, the finals, the final months of the prior administration, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the slide you showed us that was fascinating, just on the state revenue estimate and the
Or the EIA one, yeah.
had we seen that same thing for alternative B comparing to alternative E,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
would be totally shocked as Alaskans to see just the impact that on this project, quite frankly. But I don't know if that information's out there. I'm sure it is. I could go.
I know, that's an interesting concept. That was, that was prior to me being here. I have to go take a look at that, Rick. I have to look at that. But really, the biggest impact on that is price. I mean,
Sure.
price is in,
Yeah.
Remember what happened to the price in May of 2020, when price actually went negative. So the average price in the 20s was somewhere in the 40s. I remember this because, like I said, that's when I was putting that budget together for the state. And I think we had average price deck that year of 47. So, but that's interesting. I have to look at that. So we did have a couple more slides, and I want to just highlight this one, the next two. This one really shows, I think, there's a lot to unpack in this slide, right? So you see Alaska North Slope compared to some of the other major oil producing regions around the globe. You look at the Middle East, they've got the lowest. Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa. And so Alaska is highest in both categories in lifting cost and transportation costs. So, but it's even in comparison to North America. That's the one I'm looking at, right? So the comparison to North American production and North Slope production. And I think a lot of people, and this is one of the things that we try to focus on in the legislature, and those of us that have been following, that are watching what's going on in state government and the amount of turnover that we're going to see in state government, trying to get them to understand this slide is so critical, because the lifting costs, which is, to get the oil from the reservoir to the surface, is so expensive in the North Slope. And it's because, we in Alaska know that producing all of our natural resources, whether it be a cannery in remote Alaska, or a timber facility, or a remote mining camp, or oil production on the North Slope, that effort has to incorporate everything in the cost. So what I mean by that, they got to produce power, they got to get their fuel there to produce the power, they got to build the utility system, they got to build the wastewater system, they got to build the housing facility, they got to ship in the employees, they got to house the employees, they got to feed the employees. It's so much different than somewhere in North America, where you go out into New Mexico and you drill a well on somebody's land, and you use a county road, and you tie into the utility for your electric drill site, and you use county water, and you use county waste facilities. The cost that we have is just so staggering. That stability in the tax system plays a much more important role. And then, of course, the tariff for the transportation through the pipeline, as well as the fact that we own and operate our tanker system to get them to market. It's just an important piece that I think people need to understand. So we got a couple more questions. Let's go to Ken. Ken, you got a question?
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. Interesting presentation. And I don't know if I totally understood your comment correct, but in regards to the BLM and the carbon output, carbon sequestration seems to be a huge topic, and that seems to be maybe a direction that some of the opposition groups are going for. Did I understand it correct that when you said that BLM basically said, don't worry about calculation of your CO2 output, they'll take care of addressing that?
No,
it seems like
so there's a couple different things that you got to correct. It's not carbon sequestration, it's carbon emissions. It's greenhouse gas emissions, not sequestration. That's the first thing. And so what I meant by that was they said that there was the plan, the master development plan that was submitted lacked a adequate path to calculate how much emissions there would be.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I presented that incorrectly or it was hard to understand. It's a very complex, as you know, it's a very complex calculation, and it is important. And we do calculate how much we as a company produce as emissions. But the court wanted us to calculate how much emissions would be produced somewhere else outside of our own activity. And
it sounds like it'd be
and
incredibly difficult.
It is incredibly difficult. And that's why the agency said, we as BLM, remember that the environmentalists didn't sue the company, the environmentalists sued the agency. So the agency is the one to respond, right? And so the agency said, we have leases all over the North America where we have to address this issue. So we're going to develop the response to that. That's kind of, you're right. I didn't really cover that correctly. So it's a very complicated issue. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we got one more. That's it. About out of time, Joe. I appreciate all your time and all your attention, and if you're so motivated, we sure could use some positive comments. Thank you.
All right. Well, I tell you what, thank you very much, Vice President Stevens. So for everyone who's online, if you wouldn't mind just hanging out 1 second, as I was trying to go through the BLM site to find the public comment, I'm sorry to say it wasn't terribly intuitive, but I think I've gotten the link. And so I'm going to go ahead and post them in the chat box so that people can have them.
Okay, Joe, we're gonna pull out. You guys have a wonderful day, and thanks for your help.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Rebecca, for helping us pull this together. So yeah, you all can go ahead and get on with your day. But again, for the rest of us who are here online, if you all don't mind hanging out just 1 second, I'm posting the more direct links to get to the comment section on the BLM.
Jomo, could you also send that by email? Because it's hard to capture those. I'm on my phone for it.
I can make best effort. Oh, wait, yes, I can. Yes, I can. So I'll be sending out the recap. I'll go back and track these back down. I'm going to expedite sending out the recap video. And just like I did with AGDC, I'll put the links in there. Does everyone who's online now, receive the MailChimp notices for these meetings? Okay, if not,
And then also if Mr. Stevens has bullet points that you could send with that we could include in our comments, that would be very helpful.
I will do my best. The challenge I have is that MailChimp does not make it easy for me to attach documents. I can always attach links. It's hard to attach documents, but I'll see what I can pull together so you can have as complete a package as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed your super duper double up energy week. I am actually going to be, we won't be having a meeting next week. So just know that you will be off next week, but we'll be working to set up meetings thereafter. Well, all right, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day, a good rest of your week. Do circle through the BLM, make comments. Also be reminded that comment period is open, I believe, till the 15th regarding the Alaska LNG project. And so another big project here and for the state of Alaska and we residents. All right, everybody. Again, thanks a million. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.